"Oh, Evelyn, darling, still restoring those things?" Aunt Mildred had asked, her voice dripping with polite disdain. It was the annual Sterling family summer soiree, and I, Evelyn Hayes at 35, was precisely where they expected me to be. On the periphery, the struggling artist. A sheepish nod, a vague smile. Just finished a piece, actually. A rather challenging Van Dyck. They wouldn't understand. They didn't want to understand. My life in Boston was deliberately modest. A small, unassuming apartment. A studio filled with the smell of turpentine. Publicly, I was the black sheep, the artist who never quite made it, overshadowed by Chad and his sterling ventures. Little did they know, my real life was a quiet empire. A multi-million-dollar venture capital fund built on a knack for spotting the next big thing. My world of tech and innovation was a world they'd never penetrate. They saw a painter, a restorer of old relics. I saw potential, future, and the satisfying sting of their ignorance. I was single by choice. No time for romance, only investments. Echoes of innovation hung in my living room, a chaotic splash of color my grandmother had painted. A constant reminder. A shield. And as much as I enjoyed it, the weight of the secret was becoming unbearable. The reading of the will, that's when it began to unravel. The cold, impersonal words read aloud in a sterile lawyer's office. Chad, the bulk of the Sterling fortune, the sprawling estate in Connecticut, the controlling stake in Sterling Ventures all his. And me? Echoes of innovation. A painting, my grandmother's favorite, my inheritance. A slap in the face designed to keep me in my place. It all started years ago. The childhood memories still stung. Art wasn't a real pursuit. Chad's STEM courses and business acumen were praised. Mine, dismissed. I remembered overhearing grandfather's booming voice, mocking grandmother's late-night lab sessions, her scientific pursuits. Just a hobby, a leaner, nothing more. That moment. That solidified my resolve. I'd build my own empire, a testament to their blindness. I made a conscious choice, secrecy, a shield. I took a job restoring art, a cover. I started small, $50,000 seed funding for a software startup. It was my initial investment. I saw the potential, the overlooked talent. It was a calculated risk. I'd keep my success hidden. I'd prove them wrong without them ever knowing. The early struggles. The sleepless nights poring over pitch decks. The initial rejection. The endless due diligence. It was lonely. But the first success, the startup went public, and my initial $50,000 turned into $5 million. A silent, private victory. I had to keep it quiet, reinvesting into further ventures. No one knew. The family dynamic was a pressure cooker. The Sterlings, they thrived on status and control. Chad, the golden boy, the heir apparent. His success always on display. My accomplishments were invisible. They assumed I was living a hand-to-mouth existence, dependent on their charity. The contrast between their assumptions and my reality was a delicious secret. I was the puppet master, pulling the strings, while they remained blissfully unaware. The satisfaction? It was intoxicating. The knowledge that I, the underestimated artist, was secretly funding their future was a constant source of amusement. I built my empire, a portfolio of successful tech startups. I hired a team of advisors. I set up shell corporations. I became an expert in venture capital, learning the jargon, the strategies. I understood the market. My fund's annual returns consistently outperformed market averages. I built a career in a world they knew nothing about. I became a silent force. My secret was my strength. Then, Chad, desperate, agitated. He showed up unannounced late one night. He needed the painting. The painting, he claimed, held clues, instructions, a family secret. He was desperate to keep the family afloat. He was desperate to get ahead. He was desperate to keep the facade. I knew the truth. This was the moment. The moment everything would change. "Evelyn, I need that painting. Now." Chad's face was pale, his tailored suit rumpled. He'd been drinking. "It's critical." "Grandmother, she wasn't just painting, you know. There's something hidden in it." My fund, Apex Investments, was currently valued at $285 million. My portfolio included a controlling stake in Innovate Tech, a company Chad was actively courting for investment, blissfully unaware I was already the majority shareholder. He'd sought my advice on their potential, lauding their promising AI algorithms. The irony was exquisite. I'd listened, offered vague platitudes, and watched him bask in his presumed brilliance. Instructions? I asked, feigning confusion. In a painting, he paced, agitated. She was trying to protect something, the family's legacy. And now, he trailed off, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. Look, I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but this is bigger than us, Evelyn, much bigger. The truth was, Echoes of Innovation wasn't just a painting. It was a key. It contained micro-encoded coordinates and a series of passwords, intricately woven into the abstract design. My grandmother, Elinor Sterling, had been a brilliant but stifled scientist. Her inventions, stolen and exploited by the family for decades, were the foundation of their wealth. The painting was her last desperate act. A record of her work and a way to expose the truth. The painting is sentimental, I said, stalling. I'm not sure I can just give it away. He stopped pacing, his eyes narrowed. This isn't about sentiment, Evelyn. This is about survival. Sterling Ventures is facing challenges. We need a boost. And I believe what's in that painting holds the key. My annual returns had averaged 28% over the last 5 years, far exceeding the market average. I'd quietly acquired a controlling interest in Sterling Robotics, another company within the family's orbit, a move they dismissed as a foolish investment. The irony was a constant hum beneath the surface of my interactions with Chad. What kind of challenges? I pressed, enjoying his discomfort. He hesitated, then blurted out, fraud. Allegations of insider trading, it's a mess, and the painting, it could save us. He didn't know he was speaking the truth. I sighed dramatically. All right, Chad, let's take a look. My voice was calm, but inside, a storm was brewing. He was handing me the weapon I'd been waiting for. I led him to the painting. As he hovered, I reached up, my fingers tracing the vibrant colors, the hidden lines. This was it, the moment of truth, the passwords. The coordinates, my grandmother's legacy, and Chad's undoing, the vault. It was located in a remote Swiss bank, accessible only with the coordinates and passwords embedded within the painting. It was a treasure trove of stolen designs, prototypes, and financial records, proving the decades of corporate fraud and theft that had fueled the Sterling fortune. Chad's greed, his desperation. It was the catalyst. He was about to be exposed. And with him, the entire Sterling dynasty would crumble. I watched him, and I waited. The painting, the vault, the secrets, the truth was on its way. Here, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I reached behind the painting and pulled a small, silver key from a hidden compartment. This is the key to the vault. Chad's jaw dropped. He stared at the key, then back at me, his face a mask of disbelief. A vault in a painting, you knew. Let's just say, grandmother was a woman of many talents. I felt a flicker of pity for the man standing before me, but it was quickly replaced by a cold resolve. The truth had to come out. I led Chad to my study. The room was sparsely furnished, dominated by a large desk and a wall of bookshelves. I sat at the desk and pulled up the bank's secure website. I typed in the coordinates. And then the password. The screen displayed a list of files. What is this? Chad demanded, pacing again. Evidence, I said, my voice firm, the words resonating with purpose. Evidence of your family's crimes, the true source of your wealth. I clicked on the first file. A schematic of a revolutionary new battery design, one that Sterling Ventures was claiming as its own. Chad's face turned ashen as he saw the date on the document, a date long before his company even existed. No, he whispered, shaking his head. This can't be. I clicked on the next file. Financial records detailing years of fraudulent transactions, shell corporations, and offshore accounts. I watched as the arrogance drained from his face, replaced by a look of utter devastation. You've been playing me, he finally choked out, his voice barely audible. I have, I confirmed, and now the game is over. I looked at the painting. The colors seemed brighter, more vibrant. The echoes of innovation, now a battle cry. I would expose the Sterling family, using their own greed and arrogance as the instruments of their destruction. I had the key, I had the evidence, and now I had the power. I made a call. It was to the SEC. The next day, the headlines screamed, Sterling Ventures under investigation. The family's world began to collapse around them. Chad's face contorted, a grotesque parody of the self-assured heir he'd always been. Shame, raw and visceral, replaced the practiced veneer of entitlement. You set me up, he stammered, the words thick with disbelief. Let's say I anticipated your actions, I corrected, my voice flat. The years of quiet planning, the meticulous accumulation of evidence, the controlled fury that had simmered beneath my carefully constructed facade finally found release. The phone rang, a shrill interruption. It was Aunt Mildred. Her voice, usually dripping with honeyed condescension, was now laced with a frantic edge. "Evelyn, darling, have you heard? The SEC? Chad, is it true what they're saying?" "Yes, Aunt Mildred, it's true." I savored the silence that followed, the unspoken realization that the little artist, the family's afterthought, was now the epicenter of their crisis. Chad slumped into a chair, defeated. He looked at the painting, then back at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and grudging respect. "How?" he finally managed, the question a plea. "Grandmother," I said simply, my gaze returning to the artwork. "She was smarter than all of you." It was my vindication, the unspoken truth finally articulated. The next few days were a whirlwind. The media descended, hungry for a story. I granted interviews, carefully crafting my narrative. The truth, I found, was a powerful weapon. Former detractors, those who had once dismissed my artistic pursuits, now clamored for my attention. Suddenly, I was no longer the outsider, but a key player, a woman of influence. The phone calls multiplied. Lawyers, bankers, advisors, all seeking to align themselves with me. Chad, humiliated and desperate, made several attempts to reach me, each one rebuffed. His fall from grace was complete, but with the power came the scrutiny. My life was no longer private. Every move, every investment, every decision was dissected and analyzed. The quiet satisfaction of anonymity was gone. The constant attention was a burden, a constant reminder of the price of truth. The family. Some offered apologies, genuine or not. Others, including my father, remained stubbornly resistant, clinging to their pride. I had broken their carefully constructed world. The scars would remain. The painting, echoes of innovation, now hung in the center of my renovated office, a constant reminder of where I came from and what I'd achieved. It was no longer just a piece of art, but a symbol of defiance, of truth, and of the enduring power of those who are underestimated. The echoes of the past, now transformed into the symphony of the future. The boardroom, Sterling Ventures, once imposing sanctum, had become my stage. The faces around the massive mahogany table, once familiar with contempt, now held a mixture of awe and apprehension. Even my father, Richard Sterling, the family patriarch, sat rigid, his usual bluster replaced by a stony silence. "The SEC investigation is ongoing," I stated, my voice calm, measured. "And it will be thorough." Chad, pale and gaunt, sat across from me, a shadow of his former self. His eyes darted between me and the assembled executives, each one a potential ally or enemy. He'd been stripped of his position, his future uncertain. "We need to cooperate fully," I continued, addressing the board. "Transparency is paramount." It was a word I'd never heard in a Sterling boardroom before. My father finally spoke, his voice tight with suppressed anger. "This is all you're doing, Evelyn." I met his gaze directly. "It was the truth, father. Your actions and Chad's were the architects of your own downfall." A ripple of discomfort ran through the room. Some, eager to survive the impending crisis, offered me their support. Others, loyal to the Sterling name, remained guarded, their allegiances uncertain. The offers of assistance were immediate and overwhelming. Lawyers who had once ignored my calls now offered their services pro bono. Investment bankers, who had previously dismissed my portfolio, now presented lucrative deals. I accepted some, declined others, carefully choosing those who could genuinely help and those who saw an opportunity. One of the most satisfying moments came during a private meeting with Aunt Mildred. The woman who had once patronized me with such condescension now sat across from me, her usual coiffed hair slightly askew, her voice trembling. "Evelyn, dear," she began, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. I was wrong. About you. About everything." I allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile to play on my lips. "That's quite all right, Aunt Mildred. We all make mistakes." Can you help us salvage what's left?" she pleaded. I considered her offer, knowing the Sterling family's history with her. I knew that she was also guilty of many shady business practices. I saw her true colors. I had the power to help and the power to refuse. "Perhaps," I said after a long pause, "but it will come at a price. And that price may be uncomfortable." The shift in power extended beyond the boardroom. Old acquaintances, those who had once dismissed my career as a hobby, now sought me out. Friends, colleagues, even former suitors, everyone wanted a piece of the new Evelyn Hayes. The media, initially aggressive, soon shifted its tone. I became a symbol of female empowerment, a champion of truth, a David slaying the Goliath of corporate greed. The attention, however, was a double-edged sword. While it validated my accomplishments, it also brought unwanted scrutiny. My personal life was no longer private. Every move was analyzed, every decision judged. I learned to navigate the constant pressure, to shield myself from the relentless glare of the public eye. Some relationships strengthened, others dissolved. My childhood best friend, Sarah, a journalist, remained a steadfast confidant, offering support and understanding. My relationships with my family had changed. My sister, Amanda, who had always been supportive, grew closer, finally understanding the extent of my ambition. My father, however, remained distant, unable to accept the truth, unable to relinquish his control. He saw my success as a betrayal, a threat to the family's legacy. Chad, in his desperation, made several attempts to contact me. He offered apologies, pleas for help, even threats. I ignored them all. I had offered him a path to redemption, but he had refused. The painting, Echoes of Innovation, remained my constant companion. It hung in my office, a testament to my grandmother's brilliance, a reminder of the injustice I had sought to correct. It was a symbol of my success, the visible manifestation of the empire I had secretly built. I found myself staring at it, not just at the colors and lines, but at the essence of my grandmother's spirit. I also found myself thinking of the future. It wasn't just about wealth or power. It was about purpose. I founded a charitable foundation dedicated to supporting women in STEM. I used my influence to promote ethical business practices. I became a force for change. The sterling name, once synonymous with power and influence, was now forever tainted. The family's legacy was in tatters, but from the ashes, I was building a new legacy, one based on truth, innovation, and the enduring power of those who dare to challenge the status quo. The SEC investigation continued, and the long-term consequences were just beginning to unfold. The sterling empire was irrevocably altered, a stark reminder of the price of greed and the enduring power of truth. The painting, Echoes of Innovation, would hang in my office for years to come, a reminder of the journey and the legacy I was creating. The phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Sarah. "Hey, Ev, got a minute?" "Heard the news about Sterling Ventures. Wild, right?" "Wild doesn't even begin to cover it," I replied, leaning back in my chair. The penthouse apartment I'd bought, a far cry from my modest studio, still felt foreign. The view of Boston, once a symbol of my ambition, now seemed to watch over the city like a silent guardian. "So, the family dinner this weekend?" she asked, her voice laced with a hint of amusement. "Should be interesting." "You're going to be there, aren't you?" I asked. "Wouldn't miss it," she chuckled. "Gotta see the show. Plus, maybe I can get a quote from the new power player herself." The family dinner. I hadn't been to one in years. Now it was an obligation. The invitations had been pouring in, each one a test of my newfound power. The tone had shifted from polite exclusion to fawning admiration. My father, who hadn't spoken to me since the initial news broke, was now making tentative overtures, his pride warring with his desire to salvage what remained of his standing. I'd seen him at the funeral of my Aunt Carol, Chad's mother. He hadn't looked me in the eye. It was a tacit acknowledgement of my victory and of his defeat. The practical changes were subtle, yet significant. I no longer had to explain my career choices. My opinions were now sought after, not dismissed. Even the gallery owner I'd been struggling with, who had previously refused to exhibit my work, was now begging for a showing. But the most profound change was internal. The quiet satisfaction of anonymity had been replaced by the constant scrutiny of the public eye. It was exhilarating and exhausting. The constant attention was a new challenge. The media was relentless, analyzing every investment, every decision. I learned to control the narrative, to curate my image, to protect my privacy as much as possible. I hired a publicist, a decision that felt both necessary and slightly distasteful. The constant barrage of emails, the relentless calls, the endless requests for interviews was overwhelming. The hardest part was the loss. The loss of freedom, of privacy, of the simple pleasure of existing without the weight of expectation. Some relationships, like the one with Sarah, had deepened, forged in the crucible of truth. Others, like my relationship with my father, had fractured, unable to withstand the seismic shift in power. I knew I couldn't change him. He would always see me as the interloper, the artist who had dared to challenge his authority. The legacy of the Sterling family was deeply entrenched, and he would never accept that I had dismantled it. The family dinner. I had to prepare. I had to decide what to say, what to do. The details were still unfolding. I had the power, but not the final say. The SEC was still investigating. The legal battles were just beginning. But the one thing I did have was control. I had the future. I would decide what came next. I looked at echoes of innovation. It wasn't just about writing the past. It was about building a new one. A new legacy, that was my responsibility. And the first step was dinner. The echoes of innovation reverberate still, not just in the vibrant hues of the painting, but in the tapestry of my life. What I gained was a hard-won truth, a freedom from the suffocating expectations of a family built on illusion. I gained the power to shape my own destiny, to wield influence, and to build a legacy on integrity rather than inherited privilege. I gained the satisfaction of seeing the truth revealed, the layers of deception peeled back to expose the rot beneath. I gained a sharpened perspective, a deeper understanding of human nature, and a profound appreciation for the value of authentic connection. What I lost was the anonymity that had been my shield. The quiet life, the private satisfaction of my secret empire. I lost the easy comfort of being underestimated, the sly pleasure of knowing more than they did. The constant scrutiny, the relentless demands on my time and energy, they were a price I paid for the truth. And in the wreckage of the Sterling family, I lost some connections, some relationships irreparably damaged by the weight of the past. Success, I now understand, is not a destination but a relentless pursuit of purpose. It's not about accumulating wealth, but about wielding influence to create positive change. Perception is a fragile thing, easily swayed by greed and ignorance, and the true cost of secrecy is the burden of living a lie, the constant fear of exposure. The reward, however, is the liberation of truth, the courage to stand up against injustice, and the satisfaction of building something enduring. I stand here now, framed by the vibrant colors of the painting, echoes of innovation. The echoes of my grandmother's unfulfilled dreams now resonate with my triumphs, a testament to the power of art and truth. The Sterling name, once a symbol of wealth and power, is now a reminder of the human capacity for both greatness and cruelty. The legacy of the Sterling family is in tatters, but from the ashes, I am building a new one, a legacy of innovation and truth. Look closely, reader. Have you ever felt the sting of being underestimated? Have you ever hidden your ambitions, your dreams, from those who wouldn't understand? Then know this: the echoes of your own innovation, your own truth, may be waiting to resound just as mine did.